Why did a room full of billionaires and cutthroat executives suddenly stand to their feet? For a waitress? The woman holding the champagne tray wasn't just a server. She was the wife of the host, Marcus Thorne, a man who thought he had the world on a string. He forced her to serve his guests as a cruel game, a way to prove his power. But he made one mistake. He didn't just underestimate his wife, he had no idea who she truly was. And by the end of the night, one word from her would bring his entire empire crashing to the ground. The penthouse glittered. A sterile cage of glass and steel perched high above Boston's Back Bay. Below, the city lights blurred into a river of diamonds. But up here, the only light that mattered was the cold, blue-white glare of modern chandeliers. This was Marcus Thorne's world, and tonight he was its king. The party was a monument to his ego. It was a celebration for a deal not yet closed, a victory lap not yet earned. Marcus, a partner at Apex Capital, was on the verge of a legendary hostile takeover, and he had gathered the city's financial elite to bear witness. His wife, Serafina, stood by the onyx-topped bar, her reflection staring back at her from a polished chrome wine fridge. "You're sure you don't want me to call the agency, Marcus?" she had asked 2 hours earlier, her voice a low, steady murmur. "The Fitzgeralds are coming. Harrison Cole is coming. It's too many for just us." Marcus had laughed, a short, barking sound that never reached his eyes. He was knotting a silver-grey tie, his gaze fixed on his own reflection in the bedroom's floor-to-ceiling mirror. "Nonsense, Sarah. It's more intimate this way, more personal. They'll appreciate the homey touch." The lie hung in the air between them, thick and suffocating. This wasn't about intimacy. It was about power. It was a test, another one in a long, cold series. For 2 years, Serafina had been Mrs. Marcus Thorne. For 2 years, she had played the part of the quiet, beautiful, and slightly dim-witted woman he had supposedly saved from a life of obscurity. He loved to tell the story of how he found her working as a simple archivist at the city library. A mouse he had transformed into a princess. The truth was, he hadn't transformed her. He had merely trapped her. "Now the black dress," he'd said, gesturing to the simple, sleeveless sheath hanging on the wardrobe. "Not the Chanel, the plain one. We don't want you to look like you're trying too hard. Just simple, elegant, serviceable." Serviceable. The word was a slap. Now she stood by the bar, a heavy silver tray in her hand. The first guests were arriving, a wave of expensive perfume, booming laughter, and the sharp metallic scent of ambition. "Marcus, darling," a woman named Cynthia Davies trilled, air-kissing him. Her eyes, sharp as glass shards, swept over Serafina. And, "Oh, Sarah, you look lovely. But where's the staff?" Marcus wrapped an arm around Serafina's waist, his fingers digging into her hip in a gesture that looked like affection, but felt like a vice. "Sarah insisted on handling things herself tonight. She's a natural hostess, aren't you, darling?" He smiled, and Serafina smiled back, a perfect, empty gesture she had mastered. "Of course. Can I get you a glass of champagne, Cynthia?" For the next hour, she moved through the throng. She served flutes of Dom Perignon. She offered bacon-wrapped scallops. She smiled as Marcus's colleagues looked through her, their eyes gliding past her as if she were part of the furniture. She was the ghost at their feast. Marcus was holding court by the massive windows, his voice rising in triumph. "It's a done deal, Harrison. I'm telling you. The old man, Dubois. He doesn't know what hit him. We've got the votes. The board is ours." Harrison Cole, the firm's senior partner and a man who looked perpetually worried, adjusted his glasses. "I don't know, Marcus. This Dubois Maritime is old world. They're built like a fortress, And their primary shareholder, this RG Holdings, nobody knows who they are. They're a ghost. If they back Dubois, we're finished. They're a silent fund, Harry. A lazy, old money trust in Switzerland. They'll follow the path of least resistance. They'll follow the money, Marcus dismissed, taking another drink. And I'm offering them a river of it. Serafina paused, her hand steady, as she offered a drink to a junior analyst. RG Holdings. A cold knot tightened in her stomach. A guest bumped into her, sloshing champagne onto her hand. "Watch it," he muttered, not even looking at her. "My apologies," Serafina said, her voice impossibly calm. She retreated to the kitchen to fetch more napkins, her hands shaking almost imperceptibly. She leaned against the cold, stainless steel counter, closing her eyes for just a second. RG Holdings. He couldn't possibly know. It wasn't possible. Marcus strode into the kitchen, his face flushed with alcohol and victory. He didn't see her at first, grabbing another bottle from the fridge. "Sarah, stop hiding. Caldwell needs another scotch." He saw her then, her stillness, her composure. It enraged him. He wanted her to look flustered, to look humbled. "What's wrong with you tonight?" he snapped, his voice a low growl. "You look pathetic. I thought this would be amusing, watching you serve my friends. But it's just sad. You're a girl I picked up from a library, Sarah. A piece of decoration. Now put a damn smile on your face and get back out there. You're embarrassing me." Serafina looked at him. The man she thought she had loved was gone, replaced by this cruel, hollow stranger. Or perhaps this was who he always was, and she had simply been too desperate for a normal life to see it. "Yes, Marcus," she said, her voice like silk. "Whatever you say." She picked up her tray, but as she turned, he grabbed her wrist. "And remember," he whispered, his voice laced with venom, "without me, you're nothing. You're just a quiet little mouse. Don't you ever forget it." She looked down at his hand on her wrist, at the heavy gold watch he wore, a Patek Philippe, a gift she had given him. Then she looked back up at his face. "I won't," she said. And as she walked back into the roaring heart of the party, Serafina knew one thing with chilling certainty. The night was far from over. And he was right. She wouldn't forget. Serafina Hayes didn't exist until she was 24 years old. Before that, she was Serafina Rousseau, the sole heir to Rousseau Global, a Swiss-based private holding company with a portfolio so vast and discreet it was referred to in financial circles as the Ghost. They didn't build things. They owned things. Shipping lines, pharmaceutical patents, rare earth mines, and ironically, several of the world's most prominent banking institutions. Her parents, Jean-Pierre and Alistair Rousseau, had been brilliant, loving, and pathologically private. They raised her not in a palace, but in a quiet, sprawling estate outside Geneva, surrounded by books, tutors, and lessons in economics, languages, and art history. They taught her that her name was a responsibility, not a privilege. "The loudest man in the room, chérie," her father always said, "is the weakest." When she was 23, they were killed. A private plane crash in the Alps. The world's media reported the tragedy of the reclusive billionaire and his wife. Serafina, left alone with an empire she never asked for, fractured. For a year, she let the board of directors, led by her father's oldest friend, Genevieve Martin, run the company. Serafina simply vanished. She couldn't breathe under the weight of the Rousseau name. She wanted to know if a single person on Earth could see her, not the heiress, not the portfolio, just the woman who loved Russian literature and preferred rainy days. She created Serafina Hayes using her mother's maiden name. She moved to Boston, a city where she knew no one. She enrolled in a master's program for archival and library sciences, a personal passion. She got a small apartment in Beacon Hill and a job at the Boston Public Library, losing herself in the quiet, dusty scent of old paper and forgotten histories. For the first time in her life, she was normal. She was happy. And then Marcus Thorne walked in. He was a donor, chairing a fundraiser. He wasn't like the European men she'd grown up with, all polish and no spine. Marcus was raw, American ambition. He had a brash energy that fascinated her. He saw her, really saw her, or so she thought. He didn't talk about money. He talked about building, about winning. He was charmed by her quiet intelligence, her lack of artifice. She was charmed by his attention. He was the first man who wanted Serafina Hayes. The romance was a whirlwind. He was attentive, generous and protective. He loved that she was unimpressed by his world, not realizing she had been raised in a world that dwarfed his. She fell in love. And in her desire to keep this one, real thing for herself, she kept her secret. She told him her parents had passed away, that she was alone, that the small trust fund she lived on was modest. He'd found her. He'd saved her from a lonely life. The wedding was small and private, she insisted. And then, almost immediately, the change began. The man who loved her quiet nature now called her boring. The man who praised her intelligence now belittled her. His protection became control. He insisted she quit her pointless job. He moved them from his Back Bay condo to the sterile penthouse. He isolated her. Serafina, the woman trained to analyze complex market strategies, realized she had made the most foolish investment of her life. She had given her heart to a man who didn't want a partner. He wanted a possession, a beautiful, silent accessory to prove he had class. She stayed, not out of weakness, but out of strategy. She saw the rot in his character and began to suspect it ran through his business. She endured the humiliation, the casual cruelty, the lonely nights. She watched. She listened. And in the dead of night, she made quiet, encrypted calls to Geneva. Genevieve, she'd murmur into her secure phone. Run a check on Apex Capital. I want to know everything. Their leverage, their exposure, their partners. Serafina, mon Dieu, Genevieve's voice would crackle back. Just come home. Why are you playing this game with this child? He's not a child, Jen. He's a predator. And he's my husband. I need to be sure. I won't run. I am my father's daughter. I will walk out, and I will do it when I am ready. For 6 months, she had been planning her exit. She'd been setting up a new foundation, arranging for the quiet transfer of assets, and, with Genevieve's help, tracking Marcus's own finances. She knew he was over-leveraged. She knew he was reckless. What she didn't know, until this party, was his target. Dubois Maritime. She wanted to laugh, a bitter, hysterical sound. It wasn't just a company. It was her grandfather's first acquisition. It was the bedrock of the Rousseau portfolio. Marcus wasn't just a bully. He was an idiot, a blind, arrogant fool who was trying to stage a hostile takeover of his own wife's company. And RG Holdings, the ghost shareholder he was so certain would follow the money? That was her. The game was over. He had just handed her the checkmate. Serafina returned to the living room, her composure a mask of porcelain. The air was thick with smoke and self-congratulation. Marcus was now at the center of the room, a glass of scotch in hand, regaling Harrison Cole and 2 other partners with his battle plan. The old man, Arnaud Dubois, he's a relic, Marcus sneered, and several people chuckled. He still believes in handshakes and gentlemen's agreements. I'm running circles around his legal team. He won't even know we've taken the company until I'm sitting in his chair." "What about the employees?" asked a junior partner, David. "They're one of the few shipping firms left with a full pension and benefits package. The unions are strong." "Unions?" Marcus scoffed. "Pensions? That's the first thing we gut. We strip the assets, sell the fleet, and leverage the port contracts. The company is fat. We'll trim it to the bone. That's where the real profit is." Serafina felt a chill. Her grandfather had known the dock workers. He'd built that company with them. This wasn't just business, it was desecration. She moved toward them, her tray held high. "Mr. Cole, more champagne." Harrison Cole, his eyes fixed on Marcus, waved her away dismissively. "Not now, dear." Dear. She was a piece of furniture. Marcus saw her, and his eyes narrowed. He wanted her gone. He wanted to be the only star in the sky. He smiled a cruel, thin smile. "Sarah, darling, you've been working so hard, but you missed a spot." He pointed to the floor near his feet. A guest had dropped an olive. The room didn't go silent, but a few conversations tapered off. The partners, Cole, David, the others, looked away, a flicker of embarrassment in their eyes. But no one spoke. No one challenged the king. "Pick it up, darling," Marcus said, his voice soft, almost loving. But his eyes were pure steel. It was a loyalty test, a public execution of her dignity. Serafina looked at the olive on the polished marble floor. She looked at Marcus's $3,000 Italian leather shoe, inches away from it. She saw the smirks on the faces of his rivals, the pity in the eyes of their wives. This was the moment, the final, clarifying humiliation. The man who swore to protect her was asking her to kneel. "Sarah," he warned, his smile tightening. She set the silver tray down on a nearby table with a quiet, definitive click. The room was silent now. "No," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the jazz music like a razor. Marcus's face flushed a dark, ugly red. "What did you say?" I said, "No, I won't be picking that up." She turned, not to the kitchen, but to the hallway that led to their private wing. "Serafina!" Marcus hissed, his voice a whip crack. "Don't you dare walk away from me. You're making a scene." "No, Marcus," she said, pausing in the hallway's arch. She looked back at him, at the room full of powerful people who were now staring, transfixed. "You already made the scene. I'm just ending the play." She walked away, her back straight, every step a hammer blow against the life she had been living. She heard Marcus hiss, "Get back here!" But she didn't slow down. She entered her study, the one room he never entered, calling it her mouse hole. It was sleek, modern, and held only a desk, a chair, and a state-of-the-art, fully encrypted communications array linked directly to Geneva. She sat down and pressed a single button. A second later, a voice answered. "Genevieve." "It's me," Serafina said, her voice shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, liberating rage. "The time is now, Jen. I'm done." "Thank God," Genevieve breathed. "What do you need?" "I want you to liquidate our entire position in Apex Capital. All of it. I don't care about the price. I want it sold." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Russo Global held a 15% silent stake in Marcus's firm, an investment made long before Serafina ever met him. It was an anchor of their stability. "Sarah, that's over $1 billion. Dumping it at once will crash their stock. It will destroy them." "I know," Serafina said. "That's the point. The Zurich exchange opens in, 30 minutes. Do it. Consider it done. What else? Get me Arnaud Dubois. Now, I don't care where he is. I need to speak to him. He's in Boston, Sarah. He flew in for an emergency board meeting tomorrow, because of your husband." Serafina smiled, a cold, sharp expression. "I know. Get him on the line. And then find me a car, a real one. I'm leaving." She hung up, stood, and walked into her adjoining dressing room. She ignored the simple black dress crumpled on the floor. She pushed past the rows of clothing Marcus had bought her, the tasteful beige, the elegant greys. In the very back, sealed in a garment bag, was her own clothing. She unzipped it. Inside was a custom-made suit by a designer in Milan, a deep, powerful navy blue. The fabric was severe, the cut immaculate. It was the suit of a CEO, the suit of a Rousseau. She began to change. The mouse was done. The queen was ready. Back in the penthouse, the atmosphere had curdled. Serafina's exit had thrown a grenade into Marcus's perfectly curated evening. He was pacing by the window, a fresh scotch in hand, forcing a laugh. "Women, eh?" he said to Harrison Cole. "So emotional. She's probably having a migraine. She'll be fine." Cole wasn't smiling. "She's embarrassed you, Marcus. In front of everyone. In front of me." "She's embarrassed herself," Marcus snapped. "She's a librarian, Harry. She's not built for this kind of pressure. Forget her. Let's talk about the Dubois vote. We need to be unified when we—" The chrome-plated elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged. A hush fell over the room. This was not a guest elevator. It was the private car, and the only other person with a key for it was the one Marcus had been waiting for all night. The one he'd been simultaneously bragging about and dreading. The doors slid open. The butler, the one staff member Serafina had insisted on retaining, an old family friend from Geneva whom Marcus mistook for a simple employee, stepped forward. "Announcing Mr. Arnaud Dubois," the butler, Antoine, said, his voice clear and sharp. An older man, probably in his late 70s, stepped into the room. He was tall, thin as a rail, with a shock of white hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore a perfectly tailored three-piece suit that made every other man in the room look like a child. This was Arnaud Dubois, the relic, the dinosaur, the CEO of Dubois Maritime. Marcus's anger vanished, replaced by a slick, predatory charm. He strode forward, hand outstretched. "Arnaud, welcome, welcome. I'm Marcus Thorne. So glad you could finally make it. We were just toasting your legacy." Arnaud Dubois did not look at Marcus. He did not take his hand. His sharp blue eyes were scanning the room, a look of profound distaste on his face. "I am not here for your toasts, Mr. Thorne," Dubois said, his voice a gravelly French accent. "I am here because my board informed me you were hosting this. I came to tell you to your face. The answer is no. We will not be bought. We will not be gutted. You and your vulture firm can go back to whatever hole you crawled out of." The colour drained from Marcus's face. Harrison Cole stepped forward, his hands raised placatingly. "Now, Arnaud, let's not be hasty. The offer is more than generous. Our shareholders—" "Your shareholders?" Dubois interrupted, his voice rising. "Your shareholders are children playing with matches. The real power, the only power that matters in this deal, is RG Holdings, and they have not, and will not, approve this circus. I came here as a courtesy. Now, if you'll excuse me." He turned to leave. "Wait," Marcus said, desperation creeping into his voice. "RG Holdings, they're just a name on a page. They're silent. They don't even know who you are." Dubois stopped. He turned back slowly, a look of pity on his aged face. "They know exactly who I am, monsieur, and it is clear you have no idea who they are." It was at that exact moment that Serafina returned. She emerged from the hallway, not in the simple black dress of a servant, but in the navy blue suit. Her hair, once in a simple bun, was down, falling over her shoulders in a sleek, dark wave. She wore a string of simple, perfect pearls. She looked, in a word, regal. The room, already quiet, went utterly still. Marcus stared, his mouth opening and closing. "Sarah, what the hell are you wearing? I told you to go to your room." Serafina didn't look at him. Her eyes met Arnaud Dubois'. Arnaud froze. He stared at her, his granite expression crumbling. His eyes widened, first in disbelief, then in confusion, and then in a sudden, blinding flash of complete and total recognition. He bowed. It wasn't a nod, it wasn't a small inclination of the head. It was a full, formal, European bow from the waist, a gesture of profound and undeniable respect. "Madame," he breathed, his voice cracking with shock. "Forgive me. I had no idea." Marcus Thorne's world stopped. He looked at the scene, and his brain simply refused to process it. Arnaud Dubois, the titan of industry, the man who had just spat in his face, was bowing to his wife, to Sarah, the librarian. "Arnaud? What are you doing?" Marcus laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. That's just my wife, Sarah. Serafina, get up, you're making a scene." Dubois straightened up, but his eyes never left Serafina. He completely ignored Marcus, as if he were a buzzing fly. "Madame Rousseau," Dubois said, his voice filled with an awe that silenced the remaining whispers. "You are in Boston? Why did no one inform me? I would have come to you." "Genevieve," she said nothing. The name hit the room like a thunderclap. Rousseau. Harrison Cole, who had been staring at Serafina's suit, turned sheet white. He was a man who lived on names, on connections, and that was a name he knew. "Rousseau?" Cole whispered, his voice hoarse. "As in, Rousseau Global?" Dubois looked at Cole, his confusion turning to anger. He gestured to Serafina. "But of course, this is Madame Serafina Rousseau, the principal owner of RG Holdings, and therefore my majority shareholder, the woman I answer to." He turned back to Serafina, his expression hardening as he took in the scene again, the half-eaten trays of food, the glittering, hostile crowd, and Marcus, frozen in his arrogant posture. "Madame, what is this? Why are you here? In this man's house?" Serafina finally looked at her husband. Her gaze was not sad or angry or hurt. It was cold. It was the look of a CEO evaluating a failed asset. "This man," she said, her voice clear and carrying, "is my husband." A collective, audible gasp sucked the air from the room. Cynthia Davies, the woman who had smirked as Marcus ordered Sarah to pick up the olive, looked as if she was going to faint. Marcus was shaking his head, a grotesque smile plastered on his face. No, you're lying. She's Serafina Hayes, from the library. Her parents are dead. She has no one. She has nothing." "My parents are dead, yes," Serafina said, taking a step toward him. "They were Jean-Pierre and Alistair Rousseau. I was an archivist. I used my mother's maiden name, Hayes, to live a normal life. A life where I hoped to find someone who valued me." She let that hang in the air. "And you did," she continued, her voice devoid of emotion. "You valued me as a decoration, a mouse you could control, a nothing you could show off." "No," Marcus stammered, his bravado shattered, revealing the terrified small man underneath. "Sarah, baby, this is a joke, right? A crazy, elaborate joke." Harrison Cole, his face ashen, his entire career flashing before his eyes, suddenly understood. He understood the hostile takeover, He understood RG Holdings. He understood the power dynamic in the room had just reversed with the force of a tidal wave. He abruptly stood up from his chair, his knees almost buckled. "Madame Rousseau," he stammered, his voice choked. I had no idea. My apologies." His standing was a signal. The other two partners at his table, seeing their boss on his feet, scrambled to stand as well, their chairs scraping on the marble. A ripple effect went through the room. The junior analysts, the rival hedge fund managers, the bankers, one by one they all got to their feet. Not for Marcus, not for the party. They stood up out of shock, out of fear, and out of a sudden, desperate respect for the woman they had mistaken for a servant. The woman who, it was now clear, owned every single person in that room. Within 10 seconds, every guest at the party was standing, all except one. Marcus Thorne, who had collapsed into a chair, his face a mask of utter, catastrophic ruin. The wife he had humiliated, the woman he had ordered to serve drinks, was now the center of a silent, standing ovation, while he, the self-proclaimed king, had been reduced to nothing. Serafina looked around the room at the sea of pale, terrified faces. These were the masters of the universe, the sharks, the men who moved markets, and they were all standing at attention for her. "Please," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "sit down. You're making a scene." She used Marcus's own words, and they landed like a punch to his gut. Some of the guests sat, but most, including Harrison Cole, remained standing, too afraid to move. Serafina turned her attention back to Arnaud Dubois. "Arnaud, my sincerest apologies. My husband's business dealings were unknown to me until this evening." "Madame, you have nothing to apologize for," Arnaud said, his voice tight with fury as he glared at Marcus. This insult. It is handled," Serafina said. She then looked past him to Harrison Cole. "Mr. Cole," she said. He flinched, as if she had struck him. "Yes, Madame Rousseau?" "As I'm sure you're aware, Rousseau Global holds a 15% stake in your firm, Apex Capital." Cole nodded, sweating profusely. "Yes, one of our most valued partners." "Was," Serafina corrected him. "As of 30 minutes ago, when the Zurich exchange opened, RG Holdings initiated a full liquidation of our position. We are dumping all of it. Every last share." Cole's blood ran cold. He understood what that meant. A sell-off that large, without warning, wouldn't just hurt the stock. It would trigger a panic. It would be an extinction-level event. "But why?" he whispered. We're profitable. The Dubois deal." "The Dubois deal is dead," Serafina said. "You are not touching Dubois Maritime. That is my family's legacy, and you will not strip it for parts. My husband's actions tonight, his incompetence in targeting my own assets, and his behavior have proven to me that Apex Capital is a profoundly unstable and rotten investment." My God," Cole stammered, pulling out his phone. It'll bankrupt us. The leverage. We'll be margin called by morning. Marcus, what did you do?" Marcus was just staring, mute. His empire was evaporating in real time. "And Marcus," Serafina said, turning to him. He looked up, his eyes hollow. "You called me a mouse," she said softly. "You said I was nothing without you. But the truth, Marcus, is that you were only something because I allowed it. The only reason your firm has stayed afloat for the last year, through all your reckless risks, is because my stake, the stake you never knew about, was anchoring your credit. That anchor is now gone. Sarah, please," he whispered, finally getting to his feet. He reached for her. "We can fix this. I can fix this. It's just a misunderstanding." I love you." Serafina looked at his outstretched hand. "You don't love me, Marcus. You loved the idea of me. You loved having something you thought no one else could. But you never even knew what it was." Cynthia Davies, the woman who had smirked at her, suddenly rushed forward, a look of desperate panic on her face. "Madame Rousseau, my husband, Robert, he's at Apex too. He's a partner. He had nothing to do with this. He's always respected you." Serafina looked at her. "He stood by and watched my husband humiliate me. He said nothing. The loudest man in the room, Mrs. Davies, is the weakest. But sometimes, so is the most silent." She turned away, leaving the entire party to implode on itself. The room was already descending into chaos. Harrison Cole was screaming into his phone. David, the junior partner, was staring at Marcus with a look of pure, murderous hatred. The wives were grabbing their husbands, demanding to know what this meant if their money was gone. The party was over. The king was dead. Serafina looked around the room, her gaze sweeping over the sea of pale, terrified faces. These were the masters of the universe, the sharks, the men who moved markets and shattered companies with a single phone call, and they were all standing at attention for her, their expressions a grotesque mixture of fear, awe, and a fawning, desperate new respect. "Please," she said, her voice quiet but amplified by the stunned silence. "Sit down. You're making a scene." She used Marcus's own words, and they landed like a physical blow. He actually flinched, his body caving in on itself as he remained slumped in the chair. A few guests, the ones with no direct stake in Apex Capital, sank awkwardly back into their seats. But most, including Harrison Cole, remained standing, as if paralyzed. Cole's phone, held in a trembling hand, was already buzzing, the screen lighting up with frantic, cascading alerts from his trading desk. The Zurich exchange was open, and the bloodbath had begun. "Harrison," he croaked, not to his phone but to Marcus. "Harrison, what did you do?" I. Marcus was mute. His world had been deconstructed, atom by atom, in less than 5 minutes. He was staring at Serafina, but he wasn't seeing her. He was seeing the ghost of his future, a barren, empty landscape. Serafina turned her full attention to Arnaud Dubois, the chaos of the room and her husband's breakdown fading into the background. For her, the emotional part was over. This was now triage. "Arnaud," she said, her voice crisp and professional, "my sincerest apologies. My husband's business dealings, his reckless attempt to leverage my own assets, were unknown to me until this evening. It is a profound failure of judgment on my part, one I am now correcting." "Madame," Arnaud said, his voice tight with a lifetime of protective loyalty, "you have nothing to apologize for. This insult." He glared at Marcus with a look of pure, unadulterated contempt, the kind a king might reserve for a jester who had tried to steal his crown. "It is handled," Serafina said. She then looked past him, her eyes locking onto Harrison Cole. The man was visibly sweating, his expensive, hand-stitched suit suddenly looking cheap and ill-fitting. "Mr. Cole," she said. He flinched, as if she had struck him. Yes, Madame Rousseau. As I'm sure your phone is telling you, Rousseau Global holds, or rather, held, a 15% stake in your firm, Apex Capital. It was an ancestral investment, one my father made decades ago." Cole nodded, unable to speak, his throat working. He knew that stake. It was their anchor, the dumb money, as Marcus had once called it, that provided the stability and credit for all their high-risk, high-leverage plays. "I have just authorized a full, immediate and unconditional liquidation of that position, Serafina stated, her voice as flat and cold as the marble floor. As of 30 minutes ago, when the Zurich exchange opened, RG Holdings initiated a block sale of our entire holding. Every last share. We are out. Cole finally found his voice, a high-pitched, strangled sound. No, you can't. A block sale that size. Without warning. It won't just crash the stock. It will trigger the covenants, the margin calls. It'll extinguish us. That is the intent, Serafina said. But why? Cole shrieked, finally breaking, his terror overriding his awe. Why? We're profitable. The Dubois deal. It was sound. It was... The Dubois deal is dead, Serafina cut him off, her voice dropping a decibel, becoming even more dangerous. You are not touching Dubois Maritime. You will not strip it for parts. That company was my grandfather's. It is my family's legacy. Your partner's actions tonight, his breathtaking incompetence in targeting my own assets without even knowing who they belonged to, and his personal behavior have proven to me that Apex Capital is not just a high-risk investment. It is a profoundly unstable and rotten one. My board doesn't tolerate rot, Mr. Cole. We cut it out. Cynthia Davies, the woman who had smirked at Serafina's humiliation, suddenly rushed forward, her face a mask of desperate panic. Her husband, Robert, was a junior partner at the firm, and his entire net worth was tied up in Apex stock. "Madame Rousseau!" she cried, her voice shrill. "Please!" "My husband, Robert, he had nothing to do with this. He's a partner, yes, but he had no say in the Dubois deal. He's always respected you." Serafina looked at Cynthia, her expression unreadable. "Has he? He stood 6 feet away and watched my husband order me to my knees to pick up an olive. He said nothing. He found it amusing. The loudest man in the room, Mrs. Davies, is often the weakest. But sometimes, so is the most silent one. Your husband's silence was his vote." Cynthia stumbled back, as if she'd been slapped, tears of pure, selfish terror streaming down her face. The room was now imploding. The dam of social decorum had burst. Harrison Cole was openly screaming into his phone, "Sell! Sell everything! I don't care about the price. Get us liquid. Call legal. Call them now." David, the junior partner who had questioned the ethics of the takeover, was staring at Marcus, not with panic, but with a look of pure, murderous hatred. "You!" David seethed. "You arrogant hollow! You destroyed us! You destroyed me! For what? For a game? To make your wife serve drinks?" The other guests, the ones not tied to Apex, were backing away, their own phones out. They were not calling for help. They were sharks who had scented blood. They were calling their own brokers. "Short Apex Capital, all of it. Leverage it to the hilt," one rival hedge fund manager whispered into his phone. "It's going to zero by morning. This is the kill shot." "Dump anything with Apex as a counterparty," another woman instructed. "I want zero exposure. Now." This was the real party, the feeding frenzy. And in the center of it all, Marcus Thorne remained in his chair, a man hollowed out. He had lost his company. He had lost his reputation. He had lost his future. Serafina turned her back on him. She turned her back on all of it. The noise, the panic, the screaming. It was just static, the sound of a world she was no longer a part of. "Antoine," she said, her voice cutting through the din. The butler, who had been standing by the private elevator, his face perfectly composed, stepped forward. There was a small, proud, almost feral smile on his lips. "Yes, madame. My car is waiting downstairs. Please inform Genevieve that I am on my way. We will fly to Geneva tonight. I want a full forensic audit of all assets connected to Apex Capital and a background file on every single guest who was in this room. I want to know who they are, where their money is, and who they are loyal to, by the time I land." "Of course, Madame Rousseau," Antoine said. "And Antoine, have the locks on this apartment changed by morning. All codes, all keys. Mr. Thorne will be indisposed. I'm sure Mr. Cole's legal team will see to that." "With the utmost pleasure, madam," Antoine said, bowing as he pressed the call button for the elevator. Serafina took a step toward the hallway, toward the exit, her head held high. Arnaud Dubois fell into step beside her, a silent, granite guardian. She was almost clear. "Sarah, wait!" A final broken voice. Marcus. He was on his feet, stumbling toward her, his face a horrifying mask of sweat, desperation, and a final sputtering ember of his former arrogance. He looked like a cornered animal. "Sarah, please!" He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into the fine wool of her suit. His grip was surprisingly strong, the last act of a drowning man. "You can't do this. You can't just leave." Serafina stopped. She didn't flinch. She simply looked down at his hand on her arm, his thick fingers, the heavy gold Patek Philippe watch she had bought him for their first anniversary. It looked ridiculous on him now, a prop on a failed stage. "You can't," he panted, his voice cracking, spittle forming at the corner of his mouth. We're married. The firm. Okay, the firm is gone. Fine, you won. But you can't just walk out." He was putting the pieces together, but in the wrong order. A new, grotesque realization was dawning on his face. The terror was being replaced by a twisted, desperate hope. "That's right," he whispered, a hysterical laugh bubbling in his throat. "We're married. My company is gone. But your company, your money, Rousseau Global. My God, Sarah. We're rich. We're billionaires." He tightened his grip, pulling her closer, his eyes wild. "You don't understand the law, Sarah. You're just a librarian. What's yours is mine. We're married. Half of all of this, it belongs to me. You can't cut me out. I'm your husband." He was screaming the last part, his voice echoing in the now silent room. Even the panicked phone calls had stopped. Everyone was watching this final, pathetic, horrifying act. Marcus Thorne, having lost his kingdom, was now claiming hers. Serafina looked at his hand on her arm. Then she looked back up at his desperate, ravaged face. She felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, not even a memory of love. It was like looking at a stranger, a badly written character in a play she was leaving. "Let go of my arm, Marcus," she said. It was not a request. He laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "No! Not until you understand. You're stuck with me, Sarah. You did this to me, and now you have to pay. You owe me. I made you. When I met you, you were nothing. A mousy, boring little bookworm in a cardigan. I gave you this life. I gave you this penthouse. I put those clothes on your back. You'd be nothing without me." Serafina slowly, deliberately, reached over with her free hand, and one by one, unpeeled his fingers from her arm. Her touch was as cold as iron. "You're right about one thing, Marcus," she said, her voice dangerously soft. "I was a librarian, a professional archivist. I am trained to read and understand documents. I am, in fact, an expert in the field." She took a step back, straightening her suit jacket. "Do you remember," she asked, "the week before our wedding, when you sat me down in your lawyer's office?" He stared at her, uncomprehending. "Your lawyers," she continued, "Mr. Henderson, the one with the terrible mustard-stained ties. He and his team presented me with a file. It was 83 pages long. It was titled Asset Protection Agreement. A prenuptial agreement. The colour drained from Marcus's face. The wild hope in his eyes flickered, replaced by a new, dawning, catastrophic horror. "You sat me down," Serafina went on, her voice a merciless, precise scalpel. "And you explained to me, in very small, simple words, as if I were a child, that this was just a formality. A smart business decision. You told me that your assets, your hard-earned millions, your stake in Apex, your future, they all needed to be protected. Protected from me." He was shaking his head, backing away. "No. No. You were so proud of it," she said, taking a step toward him. "You bragged to Harrison Cole that your lawyers had drafted the most vicious, ironclad prenup in the state of Massachusetts, one that states, in no uncertain terms, that what is mine remains mine, and what is yours remains yours. No exceptions, no community property, no claims ever on premarital assets or any income or growth derived from those assets." She stopped, letting the words hang in the air, letting him and everyone else in the room understand. "I didn't argue, did I, Marcus? I didn't even have my own lawyer read it. I just signed it. I signed it so fast you actually looked disappointed. You thought it was because I was naive, because I was so in love, because I was a dim-witted mouse who didn't understand finance." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "You were right, Marcus. It is an ironclad agreement. Your lawyers did a magnificent job. You were so terrified that the poor little librarian would try to take your millions. You never for 1 second considered that the librarian was just signing the paper that protected her billions from you." His knees gave out. He didn't just collapse, he folded. He crumpled to the marble floor, a marionette whose strings had all been cut, his face a mask of utter, catastrophic ruin. He had not only lost, he had, with his own arrogance, authored his own complete and total destruction. "And as of, well, about 10 minutes ago, you no longer have any assets," she finished, her voice rising again, clear and cold for the whole room to hear. "Your stock is worthless. Your partnership is dissolved. This penthouse is leased in your name, and I imagine you won't be able to make the rent by the 1st of the month. You have exactly what you deserve. You have nothing." He looked up at her from the floor, his face wet with tears of rage and self-pity. You're a monster," he spat, his voice a hoarse whisper. A snake. You're just a mouse." It was his last, pathetic attempt at an insult, the only word he had left for her. Serafina looked down at the broken man at her feet. She felt a single, fleeting pang, not of pity, but of grief for the woman she had been, the woman who had desperately wanted to be normal, to be loved. That woman was gone now, and this man had killed her. She gave him a small, sad, cold smile. "No, Marcus. You were in a cage with a lion. You just mistook her for a house cat." She turned without another word and walked away. The room parted for her like the sea. Harrison Cole, Cynthia Davies, all the sharks and rivals. They didn't just move. They flattened themselves against the walls, terrified to even breathe the same air as her. She reached the elevator. Antoine was holding the door open. Arnaud Dubois entered, and she followed. As the polished chrome doors began to slide shut, Serafina looked out one last time. She saw Marcus Thorne, a desolate heap on the floor, alone in the center of his glittering, hollow world. She saw the guests, the masters, already back on their phones, vultures picking over the carcass of his life. The doors closed with a soft, final thud. The elevator descended, a silent, chrome and steel box, sinking smoothly through the heart of the building. The three of them stood in silence, the muffled chaos of the party fading above them until it was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of the machinery. When they reached the lobby, a vast, empty expanse of travertine and dark wood, Arnaud cleared his throat. "Madame," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "That was, well, it was overdue, Arnaud," Serafina said, adjusting the cuff of her suit jacket. The weight of the last 2 years, the weight of the lie, was lifting from her shoulders. But she could feel the familiar weight of the Rousseau name settling back in its place. It was heavier, but it was hers. They walked out of the building's massive bronze doors and into the cold, sharp November night. The Boston air felt clean. At the curb, a black, unadorned and clearly armored Maybach was waiting, its engine purring. A driver, a man with the build of a linebacker and an earpiece, immediately exited and held the rear door open. Arnaud, ever the gentleman, gestured for her to enter, but Serafina paused on the sidewalk. She pulled out her own secure satellite phone. She pressed a single number. "Genevieve," she said. "Serafina," the voice on the other end crackled, warm and sharp. "It is done. The market is in freefall. Apex Capital will not exist by morning. Are you safe?" "I am safe, Jen," Serafina said, looking up at the glittering penthouse, so high above them. From down here, it was just another light in the sky, indistinguishable from the rest. "The locks are being changed. The audit is starting. I'm with Arnaud." "Good. Arnaud, I trust you have the plane ready." Arnaud, who could hear her, nodded. "Wheels up in 2 hours, Genevieve. We will be in Geneva by morning." "Excellent," Genevieve's voice replied. "The board is anxious." "They'll have to wait," Serafina said. "I'll see them after my meeting." "Meeting?" Genevieve asked. "What meeting?" Serafina smiled, a true, real smile, and got into the car. Arnaud followed, sitting opposite her. The driver closed the door, sealing them in a world of quiet leather and tinted glass. "Arnaud," Serafina said, ending the call with Genevieve, "you still have that 8 a.m. emergency board meeting for Dubois Maritime, correct? The one Mr. Thorne called?" Arnaud looked at her, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across his granite features. "Yes, madame. I do." "Good," Serafina said. She leaned forward, her eyes bright and alive, all traces of the mouse gone, all traces of the victim erased. "What now, you ask?" "Now we go to work. I want to be in my grandfather's chair when that meeting begins." In the end, Marcus Thorne wasn't destroyed by a market crash or a bad deal. He was destroyed by his own ego. He thought he was playing a game of chess, but he never bothered to look at the woman sitting on the other side of the board, the one who owned all the pieces. Serafina Rousseau didn't just walk away. She took the entire board with her. The story is a powerful reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful one. And you should never, ever underestimate the person you think you can control. Thank you so much for watching. This story was a wild ride, and if you enjoyed this drama, please let me know in the comments. What do you think Marcus did the next day? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life stories. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. We have a new story coming very soon. See you next time.